what was that? And I said, that's being a woman in business a lot of the time. That like you don't, you really have to fight to be heard. And it, I'm used to that. I've had that happen to me 1,000 times at the studio. Like, didn't even faze me that he did that.
Caring for others is part of your life, but it's not all of it. This is your space for growth, confidence, and connection to the whole you. Welcome to the DaliTalks Podcast. Welcome back. I am Dali, your host of the DaliTalks Podcast. And if you've been following me for a while and listening, then you already know these two very special women who are my guests today, Nancy and Amy Harrington, the founders of the Passionistas Project. Welcome, ladies.
Hello, Dali.
Holly, thanks for having us.
Of course, absolutely. You know, it's a joy every time I get to see you all here on Zoom since you're so far away.
I know, we miss you.
Yeah, me too, me too. So let's get into this conversation. I'm really excited because you have such a unique story. And so for this Careers Pathway series, I want you to share about how you each got started with your education and how that catapulted you into the world of Hollywood. So who wants to start?
Okay.
All
I'll go.
right, let's.
So I when I was in high school, I was really into music, and I thought I wanted to be a DJ. That was my dream.
Oh my gosh.
Funny because now all these years later we do podcasts, so it's kind of like, oh, I guess all these years later I'm doing that. But I wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be a rock and roll radio station DJ. And so I chose all my college choices based on which schools had the best student-run radio stations. Um, and I ended up at BU in Boston. I wanted to go to NYU. My mother made a bargain with me that if I went to BU, stayed in Boston, but stayed in the dorms, that I could still get the experience of living away without moving away. So I went to BU, and I loved BU. It was a great school. Um, I went to the radio station the first week, and I had already at that point met my college boyfriend. Another story, another life lesson that we'll share in a different podcast. But he also was into music and wanted to be a DJ. So that's why we clicked right away. We both went to the radio station. He was given a radio show immediately, and I was not. And I thought, that's really sucky. and and then in a fortuitous fashion, I went to my first Mass Comm 101 class, and the assignment was like a visual journaling assignment where we had to cut pictures out of magazines and paste them together and make a collage and do the thing. And I was like, oh, I really like this. And then throughout the course of this mass comm class, I realized that I'm a very visual person, I'm a very artistic person, and that was really where my passions lied. So I left the DJing thing behind, and when I went into advertising and art direction. So that's what I
Wow.
studied. That's what I studied all through college. I didn't do a dual major, but I sort of worked with my advisors to create my own program where I took classes at the School of Public Communications at BU, but I also took classes in the art school so that I could, because the marketing and advertising program didn't really teach you how to be an art director, which is what I wanted to do. So I kind of made up my own program. And um, by the end of college, I realized I didn't want to go into advertising either. My college experience, and I think a lot of kids realize this, a lot of colleges are figuring out what you don't want to do. You know, you have all
Yeah.
these dreams when you're a kid about things that seem glamorous and what you want to do. And I realized advertising was just really cutthroat. And I just wasn't meant for that. But I did love art direction. So I became a graphic designer. And I had a few jobs early on, but mostly right from college, I started my own graphic design business and I worked freelance and had clients right from the start. So that's my origin story.
Wow. DJ Nancy
Yeah, I
Harrington. Oh
know,
my gosh, I
right?
can't.
I should have been Martha Quinn. I do believe that if I had gone to NYU, I would have been Martha Quinn.
I would have been Tina Fey if I stayed in New York, but that's a different.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, this is really, really interesting. I didn't know this about you, especially the DJ part. And
Mm,
I remember the first time you told me that you were a graphic designer and you had your own company. I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And that totally makes sense because you all make such beautiful things every time you post online, your newsletters, a website, all of it. That's really cool. And I love how, yes, you're right. We all change our majors. I know I changed it like two or three
mhm.
times.
Yep.
And I know parents listening right now are like, that's such an expensive way to find out what you don't like.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
It was
is.
way cheaper when I went to school. We're
Well,
talking a long time ago. But yeah, it's an expensive way to figure out what you want to do.
right, right. So, do you recall the investment that you initially made?
Mm. BU, when I went to BU, it cost $10,000 a year. It was $5,000 a semester. Um,
Wow.
I think that's probably what you pay for one class now. I don't know. I don't have kids,
I
so I
almost
don't know the reality of it, but I know it's probably like 10 times that now. Yeah, so my whole college experience cost $40,000. My parents were, God bless them, were very, very, very generous. They saved a lot and they intended to put all five of their children through college. Fortunately for them, two of them dropped out, so I didn't have to do that. And by the time I was a senior, money was tight. And so my senior year, the first semester, I actually got a student loan for this semester for $5,000. And my second semester, I got a scholarship from the Advertising Club of Boston. So I left school with $30,000 paid clear. I had a $5,000 student loan, and I had that $5,000 scholarship. So, and
wow.
again, generously, my mother paid off the student loan for me. I did not pay it off.
Very,
So,
very fortunate because I mean,
yeah,
just you said the whole education was 40,000, and in today's the average college tuition is for a year is about 30 or 32, something like that. That's
yeah,
insane. It makes me want to cry. It makes me want to encourage my child to look for even more schools outside of the United States that are a lot
yeah.
cheaper.
Yeah, and BU
Um,
was a pretty expensive school at the time.
Yeah.
yeah, I
I'm
was gonna say that
still
BU
is.
was not
Yeah,
right. BU is not a cheap school at all.
yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that part. I'm gonna come back to you, but I'm gonna now move on to Amy. What about what does your beginning look like?
You'll see a pattern, dear listener, as we go through this conversation. And I pretty much did what Nancy did. So I, from high school, knew that I wanted to get into the television industry. I have been obsessed with television my entire life and have spent many, many hours in front of the television. I am a parent's worst nightmare when it comes to like not spending time in front of screens. I was always pressed up against a TV screen. Um, so I knew when I was 16 years old that I wanted to be a television writer, is what I thought. And I went to, when it came time to apply to college, I applied to BU because that's where Nancy had gone. She was gone, she had graduated by the time I would have been a freshman, but I only applied to BU. And my guidance counselors kept saying, you need to apply to a few schools so you have a backup plan. And I'm like, oh no, if I don't get into BU, I'm not going to college. And everybody was like, are you out of your mind? And I was like, no, no, I only want to go to BU. Now, as an adult, I'm like, who were my parents that they let me do that? That was so, so silly. Because I remember I was recalling just the other day going to like the open house and talking to somebody at admissions and them going like, yeah, you have a good chance of getting in. But it was not a slam dunk. So luckily I got into BU. I was in the College of Communications. I was a television major. Unlike you guys were just talking about, I did not change that major. I was 100% focused on the plan. I was going to move to LA. I was going to write sitcoms. I knew what I was doing. Um, I had two amazing internships the summer before I graduated. I spent the first half of my summer in New York at MTV and worked on a show called The Big Blank Show, which was MTV's first scripted, like a first television show that wasn't just music videos. And it was the now MTV, you can't find a music video on MTV, but this was the very first show. And it was a really bad show that rotated hosts that included Weird Al Yankovic and a guy from Australia named Yahoo Serious, who you'll have to Google if you don't know who he is. Um, and then I was loving that. I was in New York. I was having a blast. It was the greatest job. And I got a call. I was making a collect call one night, charging it to my parents. And the operator said, they'll take the charges, but you have to call them. And I'm like, oh, they're going to tell me to stop making collect calls. And I called the house and my mother answered. She said, "Hold on, Nancy and Lisa are here and Dad's here. They're all going to get on the phone." And they told me that I got an internship in California for the summer. So I went into MTV the next day, told them I needed to leave, and they said, "Oh, thank God the show got canceled. Didn't know what we were going to do with everybody." So I spent the
Oh,
second half of
wow.
my summer in Los Angeles doing a television academy internship working on TV shows in Hollywood. So I was 100% determined. I went back to to Boston. I didn't unpack a single box. I was not going to get settled. I was ready to go back to California. And the day after I graduated, I told my mom and dad, "You need to take me to Nissan. I'm buying a car tomorrow and I'm driving across country." And I moved to LA. Our sister Lisa drove with me, and I moved to California. I had met some people during my internships, so I had a friend that I stayed with and ultimately became roommates with. And through those interns, I met a friend. Oh, I'm getting into my Hollywood work. I'm not supposed to go that far, right?
Oh, you can. I'm so intrigued. You see, I'm not stopping
So I will
you.
say, I want to back up for 1 second. The one piece of advice that I got when I was in college was from a professor who I did not like. He was super arrogant and he was kind of condescending. And he said to me right before I left for California, he said, "What are you going out there to do?" I said, "I want to write sitcoms." And he said, "All right, when you get out there, just stay flexible. You think you know what you want to do, but there are so many things to do out there. Just stay open to anything because you never know what you actually might enjoy and might really want to do." So
Mm.
drove to California, got out here, and needed income. And my roommate and a friend of ours, Carolyn Koppel, who's a member of the Passionistas Project Sisterhood, for all of you in the sisterhood, you know Carolyn. Carolyn was working on a show called Matlock, the original Matlock, and they needed a post-production assistant. And so they oversaw the editing and the sound effects and the music and that kind of stuff. And I said, "Well, I need income." So she said, "Come in and interview." I went in, I interviewed, I got the job, and I never left post-production and visual effects after that. And so I never became a sitcom writer, thank God. And I completely changed my career path the minute I got to Hollywood. But I stayed with my major in college, and everything I learned in college, even though it wasn't what I ended up doing, helped. And
Right.
so, even with all the twists and turns that people take in college, I think just the experience of being in college and the things you pick up along the way is actually the relevant experience you're supposed to get when you're in school, not the actual nuts and bolts of the thing that you think you might want to do.
Right. I think that I know for me, I certainly thought that in college was where I was going to learn how to do the work that I was going to perform in the outside world, but that's just the foundations. You actually learn everything outside of the classroom. And that was a hard for me to accept. I was kind of like, I felt like I was bamboozled. but um, but it's still super valuable. Now, you said this is crazy. You just like got in the car and you just, I'm leaving, mom. That's the beauty of being young, right? And like no kids, no bills. It's like I need to go to the dealer, get a car, and just drive across the United States. That's insane. And
It
you're
was
what, like
insane.
20?
And I had kind of prepped them for it. Like I had said along the way I wanted to move, but I'm the youngest of five kids and 18 grandchildren. And at the
Wow.
time of all of the grandchildren in Los Angeles, I was the first to move out of Boston and stay out of Boston.
Oh,
Like people went to college or whatever, but I was the first to move and I'm the youngest of 18 grandchildren.
he
So I
left.
don't
That
think
must have been hard.
anybody expected it,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, yeah, crazy. I mean, it's what an adventure for
Yeah.
both of you. So, okay, wow, there's so much I want to ask, but not enough time because we could be here for a long time. So, each of you, okay, is there a high school class that you took that now looking back, you think, wow, that really prepared me for that journey and I didn't know it then?
Mm. Um, I wouldn't say a specific class, but I was very into music. And so I was very involved in the music department. And I was, shall we say, an outcast in high school. A little bit. I was a punk rocker in 1979. So the music department was my sanctuary. So any elective I had, I took music. Like people ask me now, like, why can't you type? Didn't you take typing in high school? I'm like, everyone took typing in high school. I'm like, no, I didn't take typing because I had an elective and I took music instead. So I took all sorts of kind of music courses. And obviously I didn't do anything musically in a career, but I think that being involved in that music department gave me um, a great deal of self-worth and a place of belonging. And I think that that was what gave me, and I performed in plays and I sang in choir, and I think that's what gave me the the bravery, the courage to do things in college that I ordinarily wouldn't have done. I was a pretty shy kid, and I still am shy, but in college, I actually, my senior year, I was the vice president of the creative services for a student-run ad agency called Ad Lab. Boston University has an amazing advertising program, and we actually had real life clients that we serviced. They were all nonprofits, and I was my sophomore and junior year. I was an art director, and I had a client, and I did brochures and stuff for them. But my senior year, I was the creative director, and I oversaw all the other students in the creative side of the ad agency. So I had to teach classes and teach them how to do everything. And I had to approve all of their work. And so it was a huge thing, which I never, ever in a million years would have had the courage to do if I hadn't done all that music stuff in high school.
Wow, that's incredible. And I'm so glad that you shared that because I want people to understand that just because you're young doesn't mean that you cannot take on these huge responsibilities. And it's so important. That's something that I wish I would have learned in college. What the school offers, the type of opportunities, like for you to become the creative director, that's
Mhm,
huge. And
mhm.
not every school offers that. So you miss out on that opportunity. And that's like what I learned, post college. We're like, oh, now if I would do it again, I would look into that, not just like, how good is your program?
Right.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. What about you, Amy? What class did it for you?
I think it was just my writing, like English. I loved English classes where you got to do creative writing. Um, so it wasn't one specific class, it was every English class where you got to write something creative. And I remember it was my sophomore or junior year. All of a sudden, they told me that I had won some creative writing award. Like, I don't know how they picked it or whatever, but I won like a hard copy of a thesaurus. And It was like, you know, with like my name inside of it. And it was like, oh, somebody thinks, not only somebody, but they told people, they showed people stuff that I wrote and people really liked it. So,
Wow.
I would say that was probably a big turning point. And then in college, the BU had a TV station that did two things. One, it had a local news program like Ad Lab. It had a local news program that was direct. Everybody on the crew was a student, and the anchor was a professional anchor. So one of my
Oh,
roommates was the director of the station, so I would go in and work at the TV station, which I realized I did not like because it was live TV and it was super stressful. Even like, though it was like a college thing, it was like, I don't want to do live TV. This is terrifying. Like, if I make a mistake, it's going to screw everything up. But it also had a BUTV, which was just this like, you could go in, you could pitch an idea for a show and you could create a show. So my friend and I created like a Saturday Night Live kind of sketch comedy show, and we did a couple of episodes of this, you know, wrote skits and produced the show, and um, so it was really fun. And now it's a much bigger, much slicker deal than it was back when we were doing it. But it was like, oh, okay, we can come up with ideas and get the props and the costumes and direct it, and um, so it just kind of, again, like Nancy was saying, it was like, oh, all right, gave you practical experience, the practical experience that you really weren't getting in the classes, you were getting in BUTV, and it was just really fun, you know.
right. Wow, that's amazing. See, I think that that just makes your college experience so much more fun.
Yeah.
And so I went to college as an adult, so I already had children. It was harder to get involved in things like that, although I still had a good time. Okay, so you mentioned internships, the opportunity to do these things. Do you think that your internship opportunities came more because of networking or your academics or a combination?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, my internship was more that the ad lab. I didn't really have an internship per se, but that was definitely part because of my academics. That was definitely like I took this class. It was a cool setup because everyone sort of graduated through the process. And but I did really good work the first 2 years, and my professor recognized that. And so he put me in the position of creative director senior year. So it was definitely because of my performance in the agency.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy?
I think for me it was probably, yeah, my grades were good and I had the BUTV thing on the resume. And I also think for me it was like sheer luck. Like, I actually had accepted an internship in New York at Showtime that I got through my college. My college roommate's dad was an accountant in New York, and he did a lot of accounting for like TV people. So he got us interviews at CNBC and Showtime, and they were both like really boring marketing jobs and stuff like that, which for me were really boring. I think marketing is great. That's not a, for me, it wasn't my thing. And CNBC was all financial news and stuff. It was not what I was interested in, but I accepted the Showtime internship. And then literally an hour later, I got a call from someone at MTV saying, we need an intern to start next week. Are you available? I think an intern had dropped out. And so I was the next person on the list. And that's why I say it's luck, because it was like, thank God that that just worked out. But I said to the woman on the phone, no, I have an internship already. I can't accept it. And I hung up and I was in tears because I really wanted to work at MTV. And I was with my mother, and she was like, you call that woman back right now and you tell her we are coming to New York. We lived in Boston. It's a 5 hour drive. She's like, we're coming to New York tomorrow. You're going to meet her. And if you get it, then you'll deal with Showtime. And so my mother and our sister Lisa and I drove to New York the next day. I They literally, Lisa held up towels in the windows of the car, and I changed into my interview outfit in the car while we were driving down the freeway. And I got the internship, and I called Showtime, and I rescinded my offer for myself. And they were like, "You'll never work in this town again." Um, I showed them, but I don't recommend pulling out of a deal you've already made, but I also highly recommend following your passions. And then LA interview, the LA internship, at the time there were only like 20 people, I think 25 people that got those internships. They're very hard to get. They had already filled the category I had applied to, and then all of a sudden another producer came forward and said, "We'll take an intern too." So I was the next person in line and I got that job. So if those lucky, fortunate twists hadn't have happened, I would not have been in either position. So yes, I think I did the work to make myself attractive to them for what they were looking for. But at the end of the day, it was a lot of luck.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That is crazy because you just never know where an opportunity is going to come from, right? And
Yeah.
it does definitely help when you know people that know people because then your name can be thrown out there. You mentioned something, you said your friend's father was the one who had all these accounts. And when we think of networking, we think of networking directly with the people we know and not like her parents, right? So I'm
Totally.
so glad. Yeah, because I didn't really think like that's right. That's how a lot of communities do where like let's help these kids out. Okay, who can I hook up this kid with? Where can I recommend them to?
Yeah.
So yes,
I also will say,
right.
like, we have a friend now who's he's a professor at Indiana University, has a satellite school in Los Angeles, and he's a professor, and he is awesome at helping kids find jobs when they graduate. So like don't underestimate like the professors and your teachers as connections too, because they've seen you grow. They know like, oh, this kid is really reliable and smart, and they may know something or somebody that you don't have access to. So they're a good resource too.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've graduated, you've gotten the job. Now you start the job. How are you feeling about the job itself and your starting salary?
Mm. Yeah. I felt pretty good about my starting salary. I think, back in the day, I think I was charging my clients like 25, $30 an hour, which,
Mhm.
in the mid 80s was pretty good money, for a young kid. And I increased that pretty steadily for the first 10 years of my business. By the time I left graphic design, because I eventually moved on, decided I was kind of sick of it. I was making, $100,000 a year, $125,000 a year. I was making good money, and I was pretty happy with that. There were years that I struggled. There were definitely years that I struggled. Being a self-employed graphic designer was not always easy. Um, I thank my other sister Beth because a lot of my clients came through her. She was my networker. She did all the networking for me. She would go to networking events and join things and all sorts of stuff, and then meet people and send them to me for their graphic design needs. So I never had to actually network when I owned my own business back then. She would do it for me. But yeah, I mean, it was a good career path. I'm not sure that the same can be said for graphic design now. I think it's a completely different world, and with AI and programs like Canva and stuff, I don't think graphic designers are charging what they used to. You know.
Right. So then you never went to work for a firm as a graphic design
I never
artist.
did. The only time I worked in the very beginning, I had a part-time job at a postcard company, and it was a very niche company. They designed postcards for art galleries, for like openings for art galleries. It's like, really, there's enough work to have a company based on that. But there was. But I worked part-time there, and I did that for a year or so, but mostly I had my own business. And then when I moved out to California, I did um, get a job at an advertising agency, and I worked for a company that did all of the Academy Award campaigns and newspaper ads for Miramax and Paramount Classics. So on the Miramax side of it, I just did the artwork that my superior gave to me, like make this ad, do this thing. On the Paramount Classic side, I was actually the account executive and the creative director on that account. I was the only person that serviced that client. So I did both sides of the agency work. And I did that for a few years, and for the most part, I liked it. It was really stressful, and everything was last minute, so it was a lot of stress, but the money was great. I was making really good money then. And again, that was 25 years ago, but I was making again, I think my base salary on that job was like $125,000.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, especially for back in the 80s. That's great money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. It's funny that you said you wanted to be a DJ, and you were shy. But in order to
Mhm.
be a DJ, just like in order to be an entrepreneur, have your own business, you have to sell yourself and you have to get out there and talk to people. So isn't that funny that you said you're shy? I just don't, first of all, I don't even see that shy side of you. But
Yeah, I'm very shy. And yeah, I mean it's funny as we've grown the Passionistas and we've met more people and we've talked to more people, I've come to understand that a lot of entrepreneurs they're shy, they're neurodivergent, they're on the spectrum, and they build a life where they don't have to deal with people a lot. And I realized that I did that. And the days that I disliked the most, and when I had my business, were the days I had to go to meetings, I had to make presentations to clients. Some of my clients, I would have to go to their office and work. There were a couple days a month that I would go to a client's office and do stuff on their computers. And I was like, I hated those days so much. So there was an aspect of it that was really difficult for me, but it was still better than having a 9 to 5 job. I've just always been a very independent person that didn't want to have a boss. Like the downside of working at the ad agency was having a boss. Like I did not like that particular boss was not great either, but I did not like having to report to someone and being told what to do.
yeah, yeah. What about you, Amy?
So salary, I do not remember what I made as the post-production assistant on Matlock, but I remember being in heaven that anyone was paying me to do anything in television. So it must have been fine. I could go out to eat, I could go to movies, I could hang out with my friends and not worry about money. So I must have been doing okay. Um, by the time so I got the job at Matlock. I got into post-production. I worked there for a few years, and during the summers, because with the TV schedule back then, you'd work a season on a show. So there were 22 episodes of the show in June. From June to September, you'd basically have off for 3 months. And if you had made enough money, you could take the summer off. And if not, you'd look for a job to fill that gap. So I always had summer jobs. And the second summer after Matlock, I was looking for work and I ended up again totally lucked out and um, mentioned to somebody that I was looking for a summer job, and they came in an hour later and they said, "Do you have a resume? Because they're looking for a visual effects assistant over at Paramount." And so I quickly put together a resume, and I ended up getting a job as the visual effects assistant on a movie called Coneheads, um, which is a
I
Saturday Night Live. For those of you who don't know, it was a sketch on Saturday Night Live in the 70s. When I wanted to be a comedy writer, I was obsessed with Saturday Night Live. So I got to work on a Night Live movie, and it was right in the transition. So it was all of the original Saturday Night Live cast members who were living, like Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. And it was like Adam Sandler's second movie, Chris Farley, David Spade. It was like every Saturday Night Live member through 1991 probably was in that movie. So it was heaven. And then I ended up getting into visual effects from there. Worked on another Lois. I worked on Lois and Clark, and then I ended up helping Warner Brothers start its own in-house visual effects company. So by that point, I was probably making about 80,000 a year, and we built a digital visual effects house and worked on Batman and some other movies. The Batman, I should clarify, Batman Forever, and some other movies. And then got a call one day from the head of the movie studio, the Warner Brothers proper, that they wanted to hire my boss and I as visual effects production executives. So basically, every movie has executives who work at the studio who oversee things. So there's a physical production executive who helps with budgeting and overseeing the actual filming of the movie itself. And then there's a post-production executive who takes everything from the point where actually they're working throughout the movie because every day you're getting, at the time, film is getting delivered to the lab. You're making sure it gets processed. You're making sure everybody sees the film and footage in dailies and they're reviewing it. And then you take it all the way through the editing process and then delivering the movie. So that's what a post-production executive did. But there had not been visual effects executives before, but the budgets on visual effects were becoming so expensive that they wanted executives who specifically oversaw the films when it came to how the visual effects were designed and budgeted and created. So my boss became the vice president of visual effects, and I went with him and became the director of visual effects. Within a year or two, he had moved on. And the head of post-production asked me to become the vice president of post-production and visual effects. So he combined these two jobs. Both people had left at the same time, and he combined these two jobs. So I became the second in command of post and visual effects for all of the feature films from Warner Brothers for 7 or 8 years and oversaw 250 movies. Some never made it out of development. Some we just delivered at the end, but actively involved in hundreds of movies, and including like the Harry Potters, the Matrixes, Practical Magic,
Wow.
Perfect
Oh
Storm.
my.
Um, and by that point, I was making about 125,000 a year base salary, and then every holiday would get a bonus, which was usually tens of thousands of dollars. The Harry Potter time period, it was a little more because I was so involved with the first Harry Potter. So I was thrilled with the money. The money was great. I was a single woman. I could spend my money however I wanted. I saved my money. I bought a house. It was fantastic. And the job was great. Um, it became not great, and I'll get into that whenever you want. But the actual process of making movies, collaborating with other people, creating worlds out of nothing, um, I got to travel. I got to, go to movie premieres. I got to meet mostly, met some actors, but really mostly like the greatest directors of the time and producers and stuff. It was fantastic, and they paid me very well for it, and I was very lucky.
Right. Wow, you two have had such amazing careers. I wish I could tap into your brain and look at all your memories. But
Oh, it's a scary place. You don't want to do that.
You don't want to be there.
but something that you said is you went from one, I guess, department or one specialization within your job to another, and it seems like that was pretty easy or maybe even common for that to happen. Is that right?
I no, and again, I just was really, really lucky. Like not many people. It was kind of at the advent of digital visual effects. Like everything else had been miniatures and more practical things up until that point. Now all of a sudden people were using computers, and we were really at the forefront of that technology. And we were lucky that we got to know the executives at the studio, and they didn't know anything about it. They were like, we don't have a clue how any of this works or what it costs or how to explain it to people in the process. And we just happened to have like the knowledge that they needed to get this thing done. So yeah, yes, people would move occasionally from department to department, like somebody who would, like, there were people I knew who, like, frankly had been like in the accounting department, who would become physical production executives because they knew how to budget something. And so it was like, oh, they have the knowledge of the costs of it. So they'd probably be really good at overseeing the management of a film. In some cases, yes, and in some cases, no, because they're really good with numbers, but are they good with people and personalities, which is 99% of filmmaking? So people didn't move as around as much as you would think they did, even though the opportunity should have been there. And once again, I was just really lucky to be in the right place at the right time. And,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
And I will
This is so
add,
cool.
really talented and really hard worker. It wasn't just
I
luck.
was gonna say, right, because I'm like, yeah, you're making all this money, both of you, but you're also busting booties because that's a lot of work. And they're paying you because they know that you're gonna be stressed out because all of those deadlines, all that work. So
yeah, and
that's what,
honestly, if I broke it down to like what I made per hour when I was working at Warner Bros., because I was working literally 80 to 100 hours a week.
Mhm.
So if I broke my salary down to an hourly rate, they were getting quite a deal.
Right, I was gonna not so pretty, right? But I'm glad that you're sharing that because it's the reality. And as a matter of fact, when you said you were making like 120 or so for
120.
that position where they merged the two
Mhm.
positions into one, that's kind of low. Because that sounds like a ton of work, and I don't even know the scope of
They saved a
everything.
lot of money on that deal.
It's funny that you say that, Dolly, because that never occurred to me till right now. Like, wait a minute, I took on two people's salaries worth of
So,
job, and I got one
honestly, when
lower
you
salary than them.
right, honestly, when you said that, I was expecting you to say like 200,000s
Mhm.
range because that's two executives job. Wow, they really did get a steal.
I got a deal, and I didn't know it. I didn't know it till right now.
Okay, so now let's talk about the burnout or what made you decide, okay, it's been a good run. It's time to leave and do something else.
Yeah. Yeah, it was for me, it was burnout. It was the the thing with my job at the advertising agency was the Academy Award season was the tough part. And Academy Award season, you'd think, oh, it's a month or so. Academy Award season started in August and went through until the Academy Awards, and then about a week or two after the Academy Awards, because you have to do all the congratulations ads and stuff. So it was from August to March, depending on what date the awards were. So it was half of the year that most nights I didn't get home until after midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And, that was being at the office. We're supposed to be at the office at 9, but I would get in at 8:30 because with LA traffic, I had to
Mm.
leave my house late. I could leave my house later and get there on time, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? Traffic was crazy. Um, but so yeah, it was burnout. It was really, really intense. And similar to what Amy was saying, it was also at the advent of computer generated advertising. So, um, you know, in earlier days, we used to actually take pieces of paper and paste them down onto a board, and then we would have to a bike messenger or someone bring that to the newspaper to print it. And this now we were like making it on our computer screen, and they just invented this thing called a modem that would let you send the file to the printer, right? It was huge. And
Old.
and because of that, because now we had up until the last minute to get the file to the printer, the changes were like up until the last minute. So it was very stressful. And yeah, and I was burnt. And for me, on top of that, I think I did that job for 3 years. And so I had 3 years of having a boss. And I will just say she was difficult. I'll leave it at that. But I was very happy to get out of there. And when I found out that Amy was ready to leave too, I was like, that's all I needed to know. It's like I had saved a little money, so I knew I had a bit of a cushion, and I was going to be able to bring one of the clients with me. My client at Paramount Classics had told me if I left the agency, he would hire me freelance to do what I would had been doing for them. So I knew I would be okay. So I was out.
Wow, that's wonderful. What about
Yeah.
you, Amy?
So I was going to be a lifer. I was never going to leave Warner Brothers. I loved it. As stressful as it was an adrenaline rush. Because we such a big part of our job was delivering the movies and finishing the movies and getting it all done and getting it on the screen in time. And it was still the days of film, so it wasn't as easy as it, I'm sure there are new challenges, but it was a big process. So I thrived on the adrenaline of that. Um, but it was taking a toll on me physically. I got sick. I at one point had a thyroid condition that was triggered by stress because it was just like it was a very high stress situation we were dealing with. I think I figured out I managed about $500 million a budget a year. So it was very, you know, it was high stakes, and Warner Brothers was the biggest studio at the time.
Mm.
Um, it was the most prestigious. It was the most prolific. We were cranking. We were doing 20 to 40 movies a year. Like for working on 40 at the same time, 20 would get on the screen in a year. So it was a lot of work, a lot of travel. I was flying back and forth from London to LA and to Sydney, Australia, from LA a lot. Again, those were all like these are high class problems. These were like it was awesome, but it was also exhausting. It was just like really taking a physical toll on my body. But with all of that said, I that would not have stopped me. Like really, really um I didn't mind that stuff. Like it was worth it. For me, it ended up being more about how I was spending my day and who I was spending my day with and boredom with the process. So again, when I started, everything was like, how do you make water, digital water, when we were doing Perfect Storm, or how do you make a person fly, like in Harry Potter? And it was all very innovative. And since I've lived, it's not like visual effects is not still innovative. It really is. But I was finding that I was working on sequels. So I would be on like the third Harry Potter movie, and it would be like, how are we going to make him fly? And it's like, well, the same way we did in the first two movies. So it wasn't that interesting in that regard. Um, I had lived through the Warner Brothers. There was a merger that happened in the 90s between Time Warner and AOL, where AOL basically ate up Time Warner, which is insane because AOL was like an upstart and Time Warner had been around for decades. And it completely changed the culture of the company. And the company went from being like if you ever watch a movie about old Hollywood, and there's a studio exec and all he cares about is making sure the creative people are happy and that the movie's the best it can be and damn the money. And that's what Warner Brothers was when I started there. It was all about creativity and Hollywood. And not to say that money didn't matter, it did, and there was a lot of pressure put on budgets and things like that. But the emphasis was always on like the movie and the creative people involved. After the merger, it really became about bottom line and about budgeting, and it was a different, and people were more like stressed out about their jobs and we got to make this happen or I'm going to lose my job. And then there was a political shift that happened where I was split out of post-production and put into physical production, and visual effects was moved over there. And I was working with a new boss that I wasn't aligned with, let's just say. And despite the fact that they were like, well, you'll take his position when he leaves, I was like, well, I was kind of already had his position and now you've given it to him. So I don't really feel like hanging around for that. And I was already creatively checked out at that point anyway. I was really at the point where I'm like, I don't know that I want to do this anymore. And then that happened, and it was like, the universe will tell you when it's time to move on. And the universe was like, all right, clearly you're not going to do this on your own. So we're going to really not gently push you out the door. And what I realized was I was spending 80 to 100 hours a week with people that I didn't necessarily um, feel all that safe with. And I had friends and I had coworkers who were great. But when the opportunity arose where I could spend all of my working hours with my best friend and my sister, who I trust more than anybody on the planet, it was like, well, that seems like an easy choice. And I was terrified because I had had a very stable income and I was a single woman without any like, oh, don't worry, honey, I'll cover you while you go out and follow your passions. I had enough of a nest egg that I could, figure it out. And luckily, Nancy and I have just kind of woven our way through the craziness since then. But I wouldn't have done it without her, that's for sure.
Wow. One of the things that I noticed for both of you is that you had these high profile jobs, although they were behind the scenes, they still have high profile. And it sounds like you were able to stay grounded. Some people
Mm,
don't do that or are not able to do that in that type of workspace, like flying around, meeting amazing people that are famous and the glamour of it all. And you stayed pretty grounded and just loved what you did while you were doing it until it was just, and I think it's natural. We all kind of fade out because we change, we evolve, the pace is different. Um, and I know that it took a hit on your social life, but do you think that there are some things that you were not able to participate in or that you wish you could have because you were so, just in the trenches in your job?
right.
Life.
Yeah.
Yeah, less so for me than Amy, I think, but certainly those 3 years at the ad agency, you know, the height of the Academy Awards season is Thanksgiving through the beginning of January, because that's when all the nominations are due and all the announcements come in and everything. So I had 3 years in a row where basically Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's were non-existent. Like I didn't get to participate and celebrate. So that it definitely impacted me there. The great thing about that job was two of my best friends that I am still friends with to this day work there. And I met them, 2 weeks after or a month after I moved to Los Angeles, and I'm still friends with them. And so at least I had a little bit of a built-in social life at the job where I was with my friends every day. So that was great. But there were periods where I didn't see my husband a lot, that's for sure. And there were periods where Amy and I, even though we now lived in the same city, barely got to see each other. You know.
Wow. Yeah. And I've been there. I can completely understand how that happens. One of my sisters lived like less than 2 miles and I rarely saw her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what
Yeah.
about you, Amy?
Oh, I had no life outside of Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I
zero.
can imagine 100 hours a week. I mean, how are you even sleeping? Do you even have enough time to shut your eyes after you've showered and eaten something? You know?
No, no, it was, I mean, I'd sleep a few hours a night. But my friends were the friends I had at the studio. My social life was going to screenings because 3 nights a week we'd go to audience recruit screenings while they were working on the movie, and then there'd usually be a premiere that I would have to be there to make sure technically everything went well. So those were my outings. Weekends, I'd be able to like hang out with friends on a night, but frankly, the most joyous weekends I had during that period where every once in a while I would take a weekend where I would not get out of bed. And I would like the only reason I would get out of bed would be to go to the door to open it to get the delivery food. And beyond that, I would lay in bed for 2 days and watch TV because I was so tired. Um, and so I even if I had time to date, the only men I met were working at the studio and either my co-workers or because I had risen to a high level so young, they were people who worked for me, and there was no way I was going to get into that whole mishigas of like, you know, going to
Right.
HR and saying like, I'm dating the assistant editor on blah, blah, blah. So I had very, like, I'd go on occasional dates, but hardly ever by the end of it. And so I just had no life beyond the studio. And when you're doing something that you love so much and is that fun and like it just like, like I said, I'd travel and I'd let Warner Brothers pay the bill and then I'd carve out times to like go to the theater or go walk around a city or so I totally took advantage of those kinds of things. But like when I started traveling with my fiance, it was like oh my God, this is what it's like to travel with somebody. Like I was so used to just like traveling by myself. I was like, oh wow, this is fascinating. So I didn't have a life and part of why I left was like Nancy and Rob had moved here and and I wanted to spend time with them. I wanted to be able to hang out with them. And so when it became like, oh, we can do this together, it was like, oh, that will give me more of an opportunity to, you know, actually not be working 100 hours a week and not working 100, giving all of myself to work. And within like a year, I, had a boyfriend and I was doing more things that I enjoy, like going out to eat and seeing more movies that I didn't have to see for work and reading books every once in a while. And so I was able to finally like do things that I couldn't do before. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's what happens when you slow down and you're not so focused with work. Although I think it sounds like, from what you've shared, like you didn't feel like you were missing out on anything because you were so focused. But then when you
I,
finally decided to, yeah, to leave, you were like, okay, now I need to pivot and focus on me.
by the end of it, I was definitely feeling like, if I go to one more Christmas where I'm the only single person at that table,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
losing. You know what I mean? You know that feeling? And I'm not saying everything in life should revolve around relationships. I, I'm with the person I'm with because I love them and we're good together and not just with them for the sake of being in a relationship. But I think that I was realizing I was missing that connection. And I think a lot of my relationships at the studio, and you certainly find this out when you leave a position like that, like may not think it, but I was always kind of aware of it. And I think this is part of what helped keep me grounded. Like, this person wouldn't really be going out of their way to be nice to me or take me out for coffee if I couldn't do something for them. So most of my relationships, with very few exceptions, were very transactional. And
Mhm.
I think whether it was a boyfriend or more time with Nancy or whatever, I was looking to be in a position in life where my relationships weren't based on people wanting something from me. They were based on people I wanted to spend time with who wanted to spend time with me. And I think ultimately that's really what it was. It was less about, oh, I need a boyfriend, and more about like, I need to be around people who actually really care about me and have my best interests in heart and vice versa.
Right. Yeah. And that can happen in any job field. And it's really good that you noticed that people have that transactional relationship. I think that comes with maturity. And so sadly, a lot of people don't see it until it's too late, which brings me to another question about maturity and stuff like that. Being women in the fields that you were in, how challenging was it, or do you think that there was an advantage that helped you?
Mm. I definitely don't think I had an advantage. I think because I was an entrepreneur and my own boss, I wasn't affected by it as much. Um, in retrospect, I realized what I did was I built a world around me where I was surrounded by women. And so I didn't rely. I definitely remember early on some male clients that were difficult. One in particular who he was hiring me to be his graphic design person and design some ads and brochures and stuff for him. And I got to his office and he was like, "Oh, could you give me 1 minute? I'll be right back." And he went outside and I waited. And 2 hours later, he came back. He had gone
Oh,
out to meet with
oh my
another client and left me there to answer his phone.
Oh,
God.
no, he did not.
Yes.
Wow.
So I had a few experiences like that where I was like, yeah, I'm not going to keep doing this. I immediately stopped working for him. But I think subconsciously I just built a world where I was surrounded by women, you know. And at the ad agency, um, the higher ups were men, but I didn't have to deal with them directly. So, and my coworkers were all um, lovely gay men, and my boss was a woman. So I haven't had to deal with it personally, but I know Amy has more to say on that topic.
Let's hear it.
I, on the other hand, was constantly surrounded by men, which on one level I absolutely loved. I actually like male energy. I like, there's a certain getting things done. There's a certain camaraderie. I think men of my generation were trained to be teammates. They played sports together. Women at my generation, like we didn't learn that stuff. Um, and so there was a camaraderie about being one of the guys that I actually really liked. But to be one of the guys, when you're a girl, you have to be one of the guys. So I went to a place where, and also keep in mind, I was at least 10 years younger than every other male executive I was dealing with. So I was young. I was 27 years old when I became vice president. And I was usually the only one of, if not the only woman in the room. And I had major um, what's that phrase where you don't think you're worthy of being there? Imposter. I
Oh,
had major imposter syndrome because I was like this kid who was pretty new to visual effects and didn't give myself credit for how much I actually knew, and was always like they're going to figure out that I don't know what I'm doing, even though I was fine. Um, so what I did was I went to a place of, I'm going to be one of the guys. It's never going to occur to them that I'm a girl, that my goal is for them to just think of me as one of the guys. And so I just like tried not to be girly. I tried not to like be emotional. I tried not, like all the things that were like, oh, it's a girl. There's a girl in the room. Like if someone told an off-color joke, which people used to do back then, um, if they looked at me and they were like, "Oh, sorry, I hope we didn't insult you," that would be the worst thing because it'd be like, "Oh, they remember that I'm a girl."
mhm.
So when I was in it, I didn't think that being a woman was a disadvantage because for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm so young and I'm getting all these opportunities and this is amazing. And what's this sexism thing that people talk about? Like the women get all the opportunities. Look at me. Um, but when you say things today, like you took over the jobs of two men and took both of their positions and did the work of two men. And I guarantee you, I got paid less than each of those men did on their salaries. You go, oh, yeah, being a woman in business is challenging. And so there were things like that. And there were just little things like I remember one time I was a peer with four other guys. And I remember one of them calling me one day at like 8 o'clock at night. I was still in the office, which was pretty common. And he called me from like the drive-through at In-N-Out and was like, I'd been working with him for like 7 years at that point. And he called and was like, I was sitting in my car and I was thinking about you. And I was thinking, I don't give you enough credit, and I don't treat you the way I treat everybody, all the other guys. I'm harder on you, and that's not right. So I'm just calling to apologize. And it was
Wow.
like, I really appreciate that, and I accept your apology, and that means a lot. But it was true. He was harder on me. Even though I was equal, he was much more condescending to me. I tended to be a little condescending to everybody, but he second guessed a lot of stuff that I told him or did, and it was because I was a woman, and he ultimately fessed up to it and acknowledged it, but it was like that's the kind of stuff that was happening subliminally. And then the final thing I'll say is like recently I was on a call with a guy that I know and a group of people. We were doing a favor for somebody. And in the call, the moderator asked me a question and I answered it. And there's a guy there who was super defensive because he's supposedly the expert in this. And I was just answering the question. And the guy kept talking over me. And every time literally I would start to talk and he would cut me off and he would talk. Normally, I would go into would you let me finish mode. But I was like, I'm a guest. I love this person who's moderating. I'm just going to let it go. But we got off and the guy that was with me in the room said, "What was that?" And I said, "That's being a woman in business a lot of the time. That like you don't you really have to fight to be heard." And it, I'm used to that. I've had that happen to me 1,000 times at the studio. Like, didn't even faze me that he did that. But this guy was like shocked and appalled, like, that's how women get treated in business. And I was like, not often, not always, but often. And the more women we talk to in the Passionistas Project who have been in corporate roles, which is basically what I was, it's a very common thing. Like, you just have to fight to be heard and to have your voice. So I would say I look back 80% grateful for the way the men treated me. They were good to me. They took care of me. They made sure that I was protected. I was never in an unsafe situation. I never had a Me Too moment. They all treated me with respect in that regard. But there's subconscious behavior that's built into the structure of corporate America that leads towards women being kind of marginalized in a way that I don't think most men are even aware they're doing. And they're good guys, but it's just like the way the system's been built, that's still very challenging. And I know women who are still in the system and they still find it challenging all these years later. So I'm mostly
Yeah.
grateful, you know.
I can say the same about my own experience in the military, very male dominated. So yeah, it's very hard. You have to have a backbone, stand up for yourself, and be very tactical about it because sometimes it's like, how dare you speak up? you know? So, which leads me to what you do today. All of these skills that you have taken, did you ever imagine that you would start a great community for women to help empower them? All these things that you did in the past. And here you are now, creators of the Passionistas Project.
No, never in a million years. Like we said, back to the little girls that were really super shy, like to build a community, like where we spend our days talking to people all day long, and never occurred to me. And we haven't even gone through what we did post those careers, because there was another 15 years in there where we went and did all sorts of crazy things, including trying to start a cable network, and we ultimately became celebrity interviewers, which led us to doing our podcast. So
Oh,
we've accumulated all of these skills through the years that have we realized recently, like, oh, every single one of those skills is tied into what we're doing now. And, including the fact that we have Passionistas TV in our sisterhood. So like all that time we spent developing this cable network that never happened. It's like, oh, that's why we did this, because now we can apply those skills towards this streaming network that we have. So yeah, it's amazing how all of those skills come into play now, and not one of those experiences was wasted or unnecessary. It was all part of our path to get us where we are today.
yeah. And if I, now most people are like, what is a Passionistas Project? We're gonna have to go into like hour two to talk further about that.
Put a
But can you
link,
give
put
us
a link in the chat.
right? That's actually it's going to be like a part three because it's so long. But I love the knowledge that you're sharing with us and your experiences. So tell us a little recap of what is the Passionistas Project and which of those skills do you think are have been the most helpful so far?
Mm. So the Passionistas Project has become an online community, global online community of women supporting each other in business development, personal growth, and social impact. So it's a space of it's private space online where women become members. There's a free membership you can join. There's also a premium level where there's more benefit. But basically, it's where women can come, they can share about their businesses, they can talk about what's going on in their lives. They can attend workshops on everything from starting a podcast to EFT tapping, to, social impact topics. Dali did a great one on contacting your representatives if you have a political issue that you're fired up about. Um, and it's also, we have, like Nancy said, we have Passionistas TV, which is our power passionistas who are resident experts, of which Dali is one. Have TV shows, self-produced TV shows on women's empowerment topics. We have a podcast network of all women-hosted podcasts. We have a shopping directory of all women-owned businesses, so women can, if you think you should just go to Amazon and buy some new clothes, nope. You go to the Passionistas, there's clothing there, there's jewelry, there's candles, there's art, there's services like coaching and all that kind of stuff. And you can buy from women owned and support other women, especially in these difficult economic times. So it's really a space where women can connect and tell their stories and learn about other people. A lot of the women are from marginalized communities, so it gives everybody an opportunity to understand what someone from somebody who's living in a space that's very different from theirs might be experiencing and how they can be of support to them and understand them a little better. Am I missing anything, Nan?
I think that's it. I
Yeah.
think that the skills that we have acquired through the years and apply to that is certainly Amy and I, at the heart of it all, we're storytellers. And so we really help women tell their stories, whether that's through the podcast or in the community or in our anthology book series or in our memoir writing program. We really just are focused on helping women tell their stories. And Amy and I have both been producers. I also produced theater for many years. Another little offshoot journey that I didn't even talk about. But so we're both producers. So I think the idea of creating content and organizing and planning is comes second nature to us. But like we said, running a cable network, we know how to do the streaming. We being wanting to be a DJ in all those years in high school where did a little radio show over the PA at the high school, like help me with my podcasting, So all these crazy things that we've done through the years have really applied towards what we're doing now.
I think the most important skill though comes from our childhood, which been realizing more and more lately, and I attribute to our mom and dad. We grew up in a very welcoming, loving, accepting home. We have three other siblings. The seven of us in our family really loved and cared and supported each other and supported each other's creativity and passions and in interests. And our parents always welcomed in people from the LGBTQ community, different racial backgrounds, different financial, stratas. And this was in the 70s when some people weren't open to having people of different experiences come into their lives. And I've become more and more aware lately of what a good example they set and how it is really the tone that has been set in the Passionista sisterhood is this just like we want people to feel welcome and loved and accepted. And that is a skill that we were taught when we were children that is you're never going to learn it in college, and it might get knocked out of you a little bit when you're in the working world, but at the core, they're the most important skills and core values to remember. And I think that's what is the most important thing we've learned in our lives that apply to what we're doing now.
I love that answer. Nancy, do you want to add anything?
No, she said it perfectly. Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leo.
Yeah, you're so fortunate because not every kid can say that. Not because the parents don't want to, sometimes because they don't know how to. Sometimes, they get in their fears and they're like, wait, no, don't do that. So, I guess my last question, hopefully this is my last question because you know me, I can come up with more questions. If you were 15-year-old Nancy, 15-year-old Amy right now, with today's technology, today's world, and you wanted to become that DJ or that graphic design artist and that producer, what advice would you give them?
I would say, don't be shy. I would say people are there to build community and to love each other, and they're just as afraid of you as you are of them. So go out and do it anyway. And yeah, I mean, I probably would have started my own radio show if I had today's technology. That would have been amazing, right?
Right. Amy?
Yeah, I would say just do it. Like, you don't have to ask permission anymore. When I was starting in film and TV, like, you had to get hired by an established entity. And then even once you like got a movie in development, it sometimes would take 10. I remember working on one movie that took 20 years in development, and it was horrible. But it was like it was this long process, and you always had to wait for someone to tell you, okay, you can do this now. And
Wow.
when we lost our job, we had been working at this website, Nancy and I, writing content about pop culture. And we lost our job right before Christmas one year. And my fiance at the time said to me, like, well, you just start a website. And I'm like, just start a website? Like, you don't just start a website. And it was like, why not? And so the next day we built a website. And then when the podcast idea came to us, it was like, we can just start a podcast. Like, we have to figure out how to do it, but that's a 5-minute Google. And a week later, we were booking interviews and start a community. All right, how do you do that? Okay, we're just going to do it. And so, and in filmmaking, like every single person that you know who's listening to this, because if you're listening to this, you have a computer or a phone. That's how you're hearing this. You have the technology in your hand to shoot video, to record sound, to edit if you've got a computer, you can edit things. And 90% of you already know how to do it because you do it on your social media all the time anyway. So just make stuff. And now that's how you get noticed, is getting stuff out there and somebody sees it and they like it. But it also is just like fueling your creativity and sparking those creative fires in you to keep going. And so just do it. No, you don't have to wait for anybody to give you permission to do whatever it is that you want to do.
Yeah, very well said. I completely agree. Thank you so much for sharing about your incredible journeys. And I know, like, after this, we're going to talk about those other journeys that you didn't talk about here. But I'm so curious. And where can people follow you on social media, or what website can they go check you out on?
Yeah, the Passionistas Project.com is our website, and look it up. It's if you Google Passionistas, you find us.
There we go. All right, ladies, thank you so much for this amazing,
Thank you.
amazing
That was fabulous.
Thanks, Dali. It was fun.
Hey, did you like that episode? I have an ask. Would you mind leaving me a review? It would really help me improve this podcast so that you can come back and keep listening. Also, don't forget to check me out at DaliTalks.com and follow me on social media at DaliTalks. Until next time.